Yeah, today in Not a Drag Queen, one of Donald Trump's evangelical buddies just got in trouble for a very, very serious reason. He actually got in trouble for this like more than a year ago, but today the hammer fell on this guy. So the dude's name is Robert Morris. And I'll show you the picture just so you know who we're talking about here. This is Robert Morris. I swear this guy looks like a cartoon character, and I don't know which one, but like American Dad sort of dude or something like that. But this is Robert Morris. He is a megachurch pastor who has used his reputation to help Donald Trump get elected. I'll tell you what he did in a little bit, but I need to tell you why this dude is even important, okay? So when Donald Trump was trying to convince conservative Christians back in 2016 that they should support him, even though he was totally the opposite of everything they claimed to support, one of the things Trump did is he released a list of evangelical Christians who were advising him. This is the way one outlet put it. This is from Politico. Trump Evangelical Advisory Board features Michelle Bachmann and Jerry Falwell Jr. But one of the things, if you go down this list, and he had a lot of evangelicals, a lot of big name pastors, but on this list, there he is. There's Robert Morris, the senior pastor at Gateway Church, alongside Ralph Reed and James Robison and Paula White, who's still there today. So that's how big this guy was in the Trump world, that Trump thought, if I mention Robert Morris, this guy who has a mega church in Texas, that might help me win over a bunch of the white evangelicals I need. So what else do you need to know about Robert Morris? Well, he is the sort of person who has said his prayers can cure women's infertility, because that's how science works. He says it is scientifically impossible to be an atheist. That's a direct quote from him. He also has said trans people are a threat to children. In fact, this is he's not just big in the Trump world. Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, has called on this guy. Look at this. In 2017, Robert Morris was tapped by Governor Greg Abbott to help support the so-called bathroom bill that sought to ban trans people from using their preferred bathroom, in part by arguing that it would allow children to be sexually abused, which is not a thing that happens, but I just want you to just remember that one. That Robert Morris said, you know who's hurting children? It's trans people, and we need to make sure they can't use the bathroom, otherwise kids will get hurt. So that's another thing Robert Morris was known for. And by 2019, this guy, Robert Morris, had really hitched himself to the Trump train, the MAGA wagon. That this is from Johnny Moore, another pastor who's a friend of Trump. And he said, a privilege to meet with and pray with POTUS. This week, we discussed achievements like criminal justice reform and other stuff. But take a look at this picture. It's one of those creepy ones with a bunch of Christian leaders just touching Trump and him just standing there with his eyes closed because he thinks it's all weird, but he knows he's got to play the game. Well, check this out. This dude right there, he's like right above in the back. That's Robert Morris, just standing in the back of the room. He doesn't get front row seats, but he is in the White House there. So again, the point is, Robert Morris, really tight with Trump. And there's one more piece of evidence of this. In 2020, when Trump was running for re-election, Trump appeared at Gateway Church. This is during COVID. Everything is pretty much shut down, but he appeared at a roundtable at Gateway Church to do a roundtable on transition to greatness, restoring, rebuilding, and renewing. And this is from the White House printout at the time. One of the things Trump says here, as you could see, I want to thank pastors Robert Morris and Steve Doolin. They're great people with a great reputation. And if there's anything we know about Donald Trump, he's a great judge of character. So what do we know about Robert Morris? Great character, hates trans people because he wants to protect the children. You know where this story's going. Now, I made a video about this almost a year and a half ago, but basically The reason Morris amassed the sort of power that allowed him to be this close to the president of the United States is because he was able to hide what he had been doing for several decades. And we first learned about this like a while back. But the Wartburg Watch, a website that kind of is a watchdog for stuff that goes on in the church culture, they reported, they were the first, I believe, to report about this. And I'm going to try to tighten this up just to get to the point. But the story they broke is that Robert Morris was just a traveling evangelist in 1981 when he visited Tulsa, Oklahoma, and met with a family that happened to have an 11-year-old daughter, and her name is Cindy Clemishire. And I'm only telling you her name because she has gone public with this ever since. So Morris, he had a new wife, he had a brand new son. He ends up staying with Cindy's family a lot of times because he's evangelizing. It's not weird to have a traveling religious leader say, hey, can I stay at your place because you're my supporter, you're my home base while I travel and try to spread the gospel. So they all became very close. Well, according to the story that the Wartburg Watch published, on Christmas Day in 1982, Robert Morris apparently invited Cindy to come to his bedroom where he proceeded to touch her beneath her clothes. And he apparently told her, quote, never tell anyone about this because it will ruin everything. That's not just me saying this. Let me show you from the Wartburg Watch here. Like, you could see, this is Cindy speaking. She thought nothing of visiting this family friend in their bedroom. He told her to lie down on her back, touched her stomach. He told her to close her eyes. I'm sorry if this is disturbing to you. It is disturbing, but this is what this preacher was doing. He then touched her breasts and felt under her panties, and he warned her, never tell anyone about this because it'll ruin everything. She returned to her bedroom and didn't tell her sister what happened. This girl was 12 at the time. And you could see right below that, he repeated this behavior until 1987. 5 years. And you could see what happened later on. Morris wanted to make out and engage in heavy petting. He reportedly told, I think Debbie's his wife, that he was counseling Cindy. Things changed when she turned 16. He would take her out in his car and attempt to have sexual intercourse. Because, you know, Robert Morris doesn't want to do that when she's 12. That would be weird. But here she's 16, so he thinks it's appropriate. So at some point here, according to the Wartburg Watch, Cindy, the girl, she confides in a friend who happened to know both families. Her friend said, you need to tell your parents, and she did. Oh my God, she told her parents. And her father was angry and called the head pastor of the church Morris was working at the time to report Morris and demanded Morris get out of ministry or he would call the sheriff. Pause right there. That's a weird two options right there. Either kick this dude out of the Christian ministry and he'll escape with no punishment, or I'm going to go to the cops about it. I mean, you can go to the cops about this regardless. But anyway, Morris reportedly stepped down from the ministry for 2 years. So that's the history. That's what this dude did. And all of that would have stayed a secret. But one thing that was interesting is that she grew up. Again, this happened in the early 80s. And as she grew up, she figured out what happened to her. And you could see this in 2005. She obtained an attorney to file a lawsuit. Robert Morris's attorney responded by implying that they believed it was her fault because she was flirtatious. Let me repeat that. She was the one who was flirtatious. She was 12 when this started happening. And they're blaming her. It's very much the, well, what were you wearing defense. So she asked in this lawsuit for $50,000. And they said, we'll give you 25 as long as you never talk about this ever again. And she said no. And that's why she went public with this story after it became clear nothing was ever going to happen to Robert Morris. And well, after he became famous for just being close to Donald Trump. Like, it is so disturbing, the allegations that had come forth. But again, at the time, they were just allegations. This is Cindy telling her story for the first time. By the way, this is a side thing, but Morris has written several books, and in one of them, he talked about how he stepped down from ministry when he was in his mid-20s. That's about the time all this stuff with Cindy was happening. That's also around the time Cindy's father said, "You need to get the hell out of ministry." Well, what did he say in his book? Robert Morris wrote that God told me to take time away from the pulpit to deal with my pride. He was too arrogant. So he stepped away and then he returned. That's how Robert Morris explained his absence from the pulpit in one of his books. And so anyway, this story at the Wartburg Watch goes public, and now it becomes a story that Robert Morris has to deal with. When the Christian Post outlet contacted Robert Morris and said, "The hell's going on with you here?" This is his explanation. All right. "When I was in my early 20s, I was involved in inappropriate sexual behavior with a young lady in a home where I was staying. It was kissing and petting and not intercourse, you guys. You guys, she was 12. I was just kissing her, petting her. But it was wrong. This behavior happened on several occasions over the next few years." Notice he does not mention her age, right? And he's trying to downplay it. She was a young lady. Stuff happened. Relax, you guys. "In March of 1987, this situation was brought to light and it was confessed and repented of." He's very passive there. Not like he confessed, he repented. He's just saying it was confessed. It was repented of. "I submitted myself to the church elders and the young lady's father. They asked me to step out of ministry and receive counseling and freedom ministry." What is freedom ministry? I don't know. "Which I did. Since that time, I have walked in purity and accountability in this area." And then 2 years later, he came back and he said he and his wife met with the survivor and her family in October of 1989. So 2 years after he apparently stopped molesting her, he met with the family. "I asked their forgiveness and they graciously forgave me." That's how Robert Morris explained away what happened. Yeah, something bad happened with this young lady, but you guys, I got counseling from my church elders. I met with the family. They forgave me. I've been a good boy ever since. So relax, everybody. So the Christian Post, to their credit, they contacted Cindy and they're like, "This is what Robert Morris said. Is that true?" And Cindy's like, "What the hell are you people talking about?" The survivor made it clear to the Christian Post that Morris did not get her father's blessing to return to ministry. "My father never ever gave his blessing on Robert returning to ministry. My father told him he's lucky he didn't kill him. I am mortified that he is telling the world my dad gave his blessing. Of course, we forgive because we are called to biblically forgive those who sin against us, but that does not mean he is supposed to go on without repercussions." So that's kind of where this story left off at the time. There's one more thing to tell you of what happened like last year, which is that the Christian Post also reached out to the elders at Robert Morris's current church, the megachurch, Gateway Church. And the elders said, "You guys, relax. Robert Morris told us all this stuff about his past, and we believe he's been biblically restored. Pastor Robert has been open and forthright about a moral failure he had over 35 years ago when he was in his 20s and prior to him starting this church. He has shared publicly from the pulpit the proper biblical steps he took in his lengthy restoration process." How many of you believe that? Do you think he went to the pulpit and said, "You guys, you know what I did back in the day? I saw this 12-year-old and she was flirting with me, so I reached under her panties"? I'm pretty sure he did not say that to his congregation. But the church elders said, since the resolution of this 35-year-old matter, what the hell's wrong with you people going back to the past? There have been no other moral failures. He's walked in purity, and he has placed accountability measures and people in his life. The matter has been properly disclosed to church leadership. The elders had his back on this. They're like, stop harassing the guy who found our church and puts money in this church, etc., etc. I just to clarify, she was not a young lady. She was 12. She was 12. He said it was inappropriate. No, it wasn't inappropriate. It was criminal. And it wasn't just kissing and petting. Because again, according to Cindy, this guy, according to what she told that website, he touched every part of my body and inserted his fingers into me. That is what this woman said Robert Morris did to her when she was like a preteen, maybe a teen. And as she said, her father did not forgive Robert Morris later. So to what the elders said, it wasn't a moral failure. It was criminal sexual assault. He did not share publicly why he needed restoration. He didn't tell them the truth about what he did. And the fact that it happened 35 years ago was irrelevant, largely because this was not made public until the survivor told her side of the story, which she could only do because Robert Morris's lawyer tried to buy her silence, and she said no. By the way, the Catholic Church learned the hard way that guess what? Just because something happened decades ago doesn't mean you're going to be let off the hook. Right? And I don't know why we're just supposed to believe Robert Morris has had no other moral failures since, because guess what he did with the big moral failure that we now know about? He covered it up. So who's to say he didn't just cover up other things he did in the future? There was just no accountability of any kind here. So when that story first broke, Robert Morris was still the senior pastor and founder of Gateway Church. He wasn't facing any punishments from the church, much less criminal charges. But after that story began spreading, it was announced that he was going to resign. This is from June of 2024 last year. This is a tweet. Robert Morris has resigned from Gateway Church. And basically, the board of elders said, all right, we accept his resignation. We've retained a law firm to conduct an independent, thorough, and professional review of whatever happened between 1982 and 1987. Yada, yada, yada. We're heartbroken. They don't care. So Robert Morris resigned. And honestly, I had not heard much from that dude ever since. That investigation did take place, by the way. Some law firm conducted a review, but a lot of the people Robert Morris worked with since like 1982, they're no longer alive or they're no longer able to be found. So like they couldn't testify about anything. Robert Morris himself did not choose to participate in the investigation. So we don't even know his side of the story. But when the investigation was finally completed, the church announced that three of their elders, all but three of their elders apparently knew what Robert Morris had done before all this stuff was made public, and those people were kicked out of the church as well. So the people who had some inkling of knowledge about this but did not go public with it, they were kicked out of the church. That's the consequence they got. That's it. So despite the removal of those elders, my fear was that, all right, well, all of this is going to just blow over. No one's going to care about this. And Morris is eventually, even if he resigned, he's going to come back in front of the pulpit one day and he's going to say, you know, I made a mistake and you should all forgive me, something, something, Jesus, everything will be fine. Because that's what conservative Christians always do. Pastors always admit, like, yeah, I did the assault a long time ago, but like, come on, you guys, I was forgiven. I wasn't really a Christian at the time, but now I am, so you can forgive me. There's never any mention of the people they hurt, no details about their immorality, no consequences. This is a guy who has spent years preaching about sexual ethics and sin and consequences. And then he promoted a presidential candidate who did all the things Robert Morris urged other people not to do because Christians like him have a religion of hypocrisy. And in all that time he was doing all that shit, he was hiding this secret from everybody. Right? So that's your backstory. Why am I bringing all this up? Because apparently last week, There were 2 days of testimony in front of a grand jury in secret. Did not know this was happening. It was taking place in Oklahoma. The Oklahoma Attorney General, Gentner Drummond, he's one of those Republicans who's been a surprising supporter of church-state separation. That guy convened a grand jury to take this guy down because those crimes happened in Oklahoma, not Texas. And so they met with the grand jury, and the grand jury this week, this is the headline from Wednesday. This is from the Attorney General's website in Oklahoma. Multi-county grand jury indicts Texas megachurch founder on multiple counts of lewd or indecent acts with child. And the thing I just want to highlight for you here, this is Gentner Drummond. There can be no tolerance for those who sexually prey on children. This case is all the more despicable because the alleged perpetrator was a pastor who exploited his position. The victim in this case has waited far too many years for justice to be done. And then he notes this at the very end. The statute of limitations is not applicable in this case because Morris wasn't a resident or inhabitant of Oklahoma at any time. There were people who said, if you're going to go after this guy in Oklahoma, it happened 35 years ago, your time limit has run out. And Drummond is saying here, guess what? The clock never started because this dude never lived in my state. So they did go after him. And this grand jury indicted him. And I want to show you what they actually said, because this is what they put out. This is in the Supreme Court of the state of Oklahoma. Look at this. 5 indictments of lewd or indecent acts to a child. 5 counts. They said this guy needs to be indicted. We have enough evidence that he did this stuff. And just to lay out what they said, there's 5 of them, right? Here's what they said. Christmas Day, 1982, Robert Morris touched the breasts and vaginal area of the victim. She was 12 at the time. Then they said 2 days later, this is count 2, 2 days later, Morris removed her clothes and looked at her breasts and vaginal area in a lewd or lascivious manner. Number 3, sometime between January of 1983, just like weeks later, he touched the girl's breasts and vaginal area in a lewd or lascivious manner. Again, this is a separate incident. Count number 4 says sometime between January of 1983 and January of 1985, in that 2-year span, he touched the girl's breasts and vaginal area in a lewd or lascivious manner while parked in a car. And the 5th count says that between that 2-year span, not only did he touch her body and private parts in a lewd or lascivious manner, it says he did it by, quote, removing her clothing and rubbing his body, including his penis, covered by his clothing, against her body, including her leg, while parked in a car. It's all laid out in that document that Robert Morris has now been indicted. Like, that's what they're talking about. The grand jury got enough information where they said, on at least these 5 times, we believe this stuff happened. And you can go after this guy. That's why he's indicted. This all started when this woman was 12. She is now 54. She's a grandmother. And when the Christian Post reached out to her this week and they said, hey, this dude's been indicted, do you have anything to say about it? This is what she said. And my God, the courage of this woman. This is Cindy. After almost 43 years, the law has finally caught up with Robert Morris for the horrific crimes he committed against me as a child. Now it's time for the legal system to hold him accountable. My family and I are deeply grateful to the authorities who have worked tirelessly to make this day possible and remain hopeful that justice will ultimately prevail. Like, my God. So here's the question. What happens now? This guy's been indicted. What does that exactly mean? Well, if you remember about Donald Trump got indicted for crimes. And guess where that dude is now? Not in jail. So what happens now is this just begins a process that is underway. So this is from NBC News right here. Here we go. Morris was not in custody Wednesday, a spokesperson for the Attorney General's office said. Charges will be entered Thursday in Osage County, and a judge will set an initial appearance in bond. The Oklahoma Attorney General's office will work with his attorneys for him to surrender himself. And then look at this. The charge of lewd or indecent acts on a child is a felony, punishable by up to 20 years in prison. Up to 20 years. This guy got indicted on 5 charges. He faces up to 100 years behind bars. Up to. So the downside of that is, what's the least amount of time he could face in prison? Maybe nothing. I don't know. At most 100 years, he could spend the rest of his life behind bars. We just don't know. But this is where the fight goes next. You know, plenty of white evangelical leaders have escaped serious consequences for their crimes. The reason this one made so many headlines yesterday and today is because it looks like, for once, one of these sex predators who happens to work in a Christian church actually got punished, it seems, for what he did. And not like by the church elders, they're not going to do anything, but by like actual people with power. And the question now is he actually going to get punished? Or is this just temporary where he gets a slap on the wrist? You know, the funny thing is, last week, I saw another story of Robert Morris in the news. You know why he was in the news last week? Because I didn't even know the secret grand jury was happening. Because 4 former members of his church, were suing him and his church because back in the day, one of the ways Robert Morris tried to gin up publicity for himself, check this out. He said that if you are not happy with the way his church is using your money, your tithe money, he'll give it back to you. And they sued him because they're like, we want our money back and you didn't give it to us. The church members contend that despite repeated promises from Morris and other leaders that congregants would get a refund of their tithes if they weren't happy with the results of their donations, Gateway Church leaders refused to honor that promise. Robert Morris and Tom Lane promised on multiple occasions that if the congregation is not happy with the use of its money, it can get the money back. He literally publicly announced a money-back guarantee on tithing in 2022. And then these people are like, I want the money back. And Robert Morris is like, too bad, I spent it. That's why this guy was in the news, because he lied to his congregation about giving the money back. And now this week we find out, oh, right, he also lied about the whole molesting thing he did 35 years ago. So just a total piece of garbage, this dude. But maybe there's some consequences now. We'll see. I hope. But I mean, my God, kudos to Cindy for telling this story and starting the ball rolling to get justice against this guy. And I think it's worth noting, this is one of the dudes Donald Trump pointed to and said, if you like him, you're going to love me. This is one of Donald Trump's like character witnesses. Like, Robert Morris vouches for me, so I got to be a good guy. And now we find out Robert Morris was a monster, which totally tracks. All right, what questions we got here? He looks like the love child of William Shatner and Tim Allen. Yikes. Where is he again? Here he is. Does he? Does he? I don't know if I see it, but I'll give it to you. Points. What else we got? Is Gateway an evangelistic church? Yeah, I believe it's a non-denominational evangelical church. And it's very big. Though they have lost a lot of members since all of this broke. Sounds like a textbook case of a trusted adult spending years manipulating a child into CSA. I know there's a technical term for that, but I'm not sure evangelicals know the proper definition. Yeah, I mean, it's the word they use against anyone who's an LGBTQ person or an ally, or anyone that's like, hey, drag queens are fine reading to children. It's okay. And they have the slur, and then they never want to look in the mirror. You can repent and go to jail at the same time, right? Like, you would have so much time to read the Bible behind bars. take the opportunity. It's what you want, right? So tired of these religions protecting abusers. The concept of forgiveness just gets wielded as a weapon against their victims, making the trauma worse, just so abusers can hide from consequences. No kidding. I mean, that's the one thing religion is good at, convincing you to trust someone who has not earned your trust, and then a lot of times taking advantage of that trust. Play bitch games, win bitch prizes. Yeah, I mean, I think this is in reference to you donated to this dude's church. Why did you think you were actually going to get your money back? I think there have been lawsuits against the Mormon church as well, because people said I've given, X percentage of my life savings to this church. I don't believe any of it. You lied to me. I want my money back. And I think the courts have generally said you don't get your money back for that one.